tea meeting. Take the second card. 3 cards every day. So it's a card with a lot of. So it is card number 194. There's a whole lot of things in that. Card number 194. Okay. So what is in this card? The world has not changed. Okay? Yet you can change your description of it. Okay? The world has not changed, but you can change the description of it. Yeah. That is written in blue ink. And you can change your description of it, including the description of your internal world. Okay. Everybody has a description or an awareness about one's own internal world, the so-called self or image, mostly containing the history, the personal history of an individual. Why should you, for example, depend on your history? Just delete it, just override it. Okay. I would say people talk about creating a future. I am talking about creating a history. You recreate your past. Okay? You rewrite your past. For example, you went to a certain school. You say it as you visited a lot of places. Okay? Instead of going to the school, yes, I have visited Mount Everest, I have visited the Himalayas, I have visited Taj Mahal, I have visited the forests, and I have observed the birds and the clouds and the rains and the rivers. Recreate that. You can use visuals from available sources, and your family create that feeling inside you. Most of the pastors similarly recreated only. For example, there is no clarity, there is no completeness about even the so-called world history or the history of India or Bharat. Only a certain part is available. Okay? Gupta dynasty or Maurya dynasty or then mostly the other Mughal dynasties, and in the north and in the south, the Hoysalas and the Cholas and the Cheras and all those kings and all that. Okay, they are only they are only tips of the iceberg of the past, so-called history. If that is considered as history, why don't you change it? Okay? You create your own understanding of the history. Okay, forget about the external history. You recreate your own history. Okay, your experiences and all that. If it is not possible, just to disregard your history. You're carrying the load of your history, if it is not so conducive for an evolution, what is the use? So, therefore, disregard that, drop the girl of the history, of your history. Always look at that. That is the way to so-called focus on the present. Yesterday you quoted a certain film and said, there's a dialogue in that film. What the past is, the future is something, and ongoing is a gift. Therefore, it is called the present. Present. It's a present from the ongoing process of existence. So similarly, just to be in the present. The main way, one of the strategies to be in the present is to disregard your history, forget your history, get out of your history. Great lot of people, I would say, great majority of average in the normal distribution, they are all just victims of their history. That's why they cannot change. So as a trainer, I have always understood it's so difficult to change their self-description. For example, we wonder why, for example, that person, hey, we are not naming her, why she is behaving like this, or why he is behaving like that, in a way disadvantageous to that person himself or herself. You know, we're talking about, especially the best example is the so-called mentally disoriented condition. So they're all terrible victims, even in psychoanalysis, in conventional psychoanalysis. Okay, what is done is you help the person to get rid of the blocking, fixations of the past. When that is resolved to an extent, then the individual is liberated from certain anomalous behaviors. There is the so-called catharsis. Catharsis in Freudian psychoanalysis refers to, releasing a suppressed, deeply suppressed emotional content. Why it is all required? We wonder. Of course, there could be an organic element in that. Organic meaning there is a physiological, there is a so-called psychophysiological element in that. If it is just the memory alone, it could have been easily resolved. So the body takes it because the memory is in the body only. Memory is not in the so-called neurons. The brain contains only neurons. Neurons are nothing but switching centers only, like the chip of the computer or the smartphone. So neurons, of course, are involved, but it is only switching on off of the memory stored in the various part of the flesh and cellular assemblages. Like for example, when you practice your guitar, your fingers only learn it. Yeah. The movement of the fingers gets stabilized by constant activity, constant practicing of those fingers. And that movement of the fingers are, of course, regulated and controlled by the neurons. Thereby only neurons are involved. But the memory to play the guitar per se is never stored in the so-called brain. So that's why we talk about Jiva Yoga. Individuals without correcting, without having any awareness of their physiological world, their own internal world, with no sense of what we call proprioception, that or the sensation or perception of the internal world, they are all straight away going to Himalayas or sitting down in meditation or whatever and going on chanting mantras and so on and so forth. It's just a mechanical peripheral activity. Nothing will happen. Of course, it will help managing the time. If a person, especially at the old age, feeling depressed and dissatisfied and discontented about life, the constant chanting of some mantras or some sahasranamas will fill the time and would give a what you call a vicarious satisfaction that I am getting in tuned with something which he or she just does not know anything more than some heard stories. That's all. Who knows what is so-called Vishnu? Who knows what is the so-called Lalita? Okay. So, a great lot of people chant Lalita Sahasranamam, Vishnu Sahasranamam and all that. Okay, definitely it serves a purpose, but it's a peripheral purpose. Before that, even before that, one has to have the feeling of what is sitting there. What? I mean, what? That creature, that human creature sitting there and chanting the so-called Lalita Sahasranamam. Without that step being fulfilled, there's a step of jumping the step, bypassing that reality of the entity which is doing it, they are straight away. Just by learning of languages, they go to appreciate the so-called images of the deities and gods. That's why though practiced for centuries, there is no fundamental change in the human mind or human collective consciousness or individual consciousness. Get the point? So our Jiva Yoga is that. Jiva Yoga is nothing so-called great, like what they call Isha Yoga or enlightenment and Satori and all that. Okay, they are all wonderful maybe. But the required is the GV is to be identified. So yoga with the GV. GV meaning the human creature. That's what we are talking about. If someone practices GV yoga, even though there may not be a so-called enlightenment or anything, at least there will be a sound body, a really healthy human creature, like the cat or the bird or the other entities in the planet Earth. Here weak human beings, unhealthy human beings having a lot of various illnesses and debilities, they are after enlightenment and spirituality procedures. How can they ever? Anyway, this is our understanding. So we have the concept of Jiva Yoga that involves three major spots, major orbits or phases. One is resolving the mental blocks, mental traps,
Yeah.
like various fears and anxieties that have been trained into a child from the beginning of its experience of the world and conditioned into the adult human mind and self by the society and various social systems and procedures and processes. Okay? The mental traps of which we have discussed in our book, The 9 Mental Traps of India. So, first is to resolve that 9 mental traps, like the familiarity trap, the speed trap, the sensitivity lag, rigidity, fear of failure, fear of ambiguity, uh, fear of humiliation, and those kind of mental traps are to be resolved first. Secondly, the body has to be trained in its varied positional possibilities. So, according to Jiva Yoga, various yogasanas are nothing but exercising or making the body assume various possible, probable movements and positions. You know, like practicing the gamagam in Carnatic learning, or when you practice the guitar to get for the clarity of movement everywhere. Okay,
Yeah.
you practice your finger movements on all the frets and all the strings in varied combinations, so that any song can be played comfortably. It's only ordinary people would buy a keyboard or a guitar and just learn to press those frets which make a particular song. That alone, nothing else. So that's what is other procedures of yoga also. Just pranayama, just some sitting meditation. What do you do? Nobody knows. So in Jiva Yoga, first there is the resolution of mental blocks, then practicing some select 9 yogasanas according to the design and sitting and health condition of the individual, and then taking Saraswatarisham Gold, one of the finest herbal configurations, cyanic making, which will resolve a lot of other anomalies in the physiology, in the physiological design sitting process. That is Jiva Yoga. Okay, we started with something and ended up in Jiva Yoga. All right. Okay, take card number 3.